Howdy, folks. Today's episode is going to sharpen your competitive edge and change the way you approach photo contests because we're diving into the world of photography competitions. What makes a winning image? How do judges really think? You're about to find out after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, the show bringing you the insider scoop on everything photography and videography, giving you the edge you need to stay inspired and ahead of the game. I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we jump in, let me just ask you for a quick favor. Over 65% of our YouTube viewers and podcast listeners aren't subscribed to this podcast, which is crazy. So let's fix that. Hit the let me just cut it now. Hit the subscribe button. It only takes a second and helps me keep you. Just hit the subscribe button. It only takes a second. It helps me keep bringing you amazing guests every time. Thanks a million for your support. All right, buckle up. Today's special guest is the master photographer, educator, seasoned photo competition judge, and the host of the PPA International Photographic Competition held at Imaging USA. If you've ever wanted to win big in photography contest, this is your guy. Please welcome the one and only Booray Perry. Booray, man, how's it going? Good to have you back on the show.
It's good to be here. This is what, second time or third time?
It's the third time because the first time I had you on with Gary, actually, we had both of you on the show back then.
Right. Back when we were doing our podcast. And then I think you've had me on solo. And then you also had a quick thing when we were in Imaging USA this year. You had me on. So technically, this might be fourth.
Correct. Yes.
I'm going
And
for the record.
off the record, yes. And I think, when I send out my annual, what are your thoughts or what are your tips for 2025 or 2026? I think you've featured in those as well. So you're basically a familiar face to the podcast. Let's put it this way.
Good.
Awesome, and it's always great to have you back. Again, we had a great time at Imaging USA in Dallas earlier this year, and the reason I thought it'd be a great opportunity to pick your brain about photographic competitions was that uh, at Imaging every year, you host the big international photographic competition. Tell me a little bit about that competition and what makes that so special and different.
Well, it's especially special. Can you say, man? It's especially special. It's especially special now because we just changed the entire format 2 years ago. When I say we changed the entire format, what I mean is that the staff at PPA, Rich Newell, who is the director of credentials and competition, he got together with the staff and they said we're going to change what IPC is, and I mean they totally changed what IPC was. It used to be that IPC was two things at the same time. It was a place where you entered your images in the hope of getting merits, and then those merits would be applied towards your degrees at PPA. So if you wanted to be a master wedding photographer or a master photographer or a master artist, you would have to have merits, and you got those merits through entering into IPC. At the same time, the images that got entered into IPC were also being considered for the Grand Imaging Awards, which were awards that they gave out every year to images that the judges had decided were the best images of the year in several categories. And then one image would receive the Grand Imaging Award, and that was the big image for the year. So these two things were happening at the same time in the same competition. So it was like entering your homework into your college class and also trying to win a contest for your homework that you just entered into your college class. And so they decided that it was just too much and that it was too confusing and that it would be better to separate those two. So now they have a thing called the Merit Image Review, which happens every single month. Instead of being once a year, you can enter images every single month at PPA into the Merit Imaging Review with MIR. And then you can earn your merits that way towards your degree. So that's just a separate educational thing. And then IPC became what we've done for the last 2 years, which is a straight up competition. It is a straight competition. It is not, we're looking for the photograph that is absolutely technically perfect necessarily. We're not looking, there's a number of criteria that the judges look at when they look at the images, but it's not like it was before where there was like, here's the things that we're looking at and this is how it's going to be judged. And no, there's more, it's more organic now. It's more likely now that an image will win that, and I think that most people would say that that image is incredible. That image moves me. That image, something along those lines. So, in order to really make it interesting, they decided to have a lot of big prizes, big money prizes. If you win first place, it's $10,000. $28,000, $26,000 total, I think, are given out. And they decided to make it a head-to-head competition. They looked at it and they said, how do competitions normally work in the real world? And in the real world, the most popular format for competing is to have a bracket system. You're in England, but over here in America, probably one of the biggest things we have is the Final Four. We get down to the Final Four. March Madness for basketball, where we start with all the teams in brackets, and it's a process of elimination till you get down to 2 final teams, and that's the big game. So they decided to do that too, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, where the images are entered and they go head to head against, the other images in their category until you get a category winner, and then the category winners go head to head against each other until you get the Grand Imaging Award winner. And that's all the time we have for today, Kirsten, and hopefully you can have me back next time, and we can talk for another hour, and you can ask me a second question.
Amazing. Um, what interests me is, of course, and we'll get to how do you actually win, or what do you have to do to win a competition like that, or to do well. Um, but what struck me about the IPC was just simply how big it was, like how many categories there were and subcategories. I found that really staggering because it wasn't just like a wedding category. There was like a, I don't know, a best groom portrait category. I forget exactly
Well,
what it was called.
there's a technical reason for that, and it's because in order to have the bracket system, you've got to start with 16 categories.
Right.
Right? So there's got to be 16 categories so that you can go 16 becomes 8, becomes 4, becomes 2, becomes 1 through the process of elimination in the final rounds. So if you only had 8 categories, there would just be 8 become 4, become 2, become 1. By having 16, it just widens it out and makes it better. So every year, some of the categories change. They have one category that is specifically a yearly category, and it changes every single year. They'll pick something that normally would not get enough participation to be a yearly category, but once every 3 or 4 years or so or whatever, we'll put this category in, as specifically, and that way you can attract those people who do that sort of photography, but there's not a lot of them, and they've been saving these images up, waiting for their shot, to have a shot at the Grand Imaging Award. And I mean, every year there's changes. Rich and I were just talking this year, because every year you never know. You build out the 16 categories, and then you look, and one category will get 400 entries, and another category will get 50. And you're like, okay, how can we make this a little bit better? Sometimes they'll split up categories. For example, what was we talking about? I was talking about the other day. Oh, like if you look at landscape, you could easily split landscape into 2 categories. One of the categories being just flowers, and then the other one being everything else. Because if you look at the landscape pictures that come up, there's a large majority of them are people who take close-ups of flowers. So if you could take that and make it its own category if you wanted to. Or you can break apart seniors. Can just be seniors, or it can be senior boy, senior girl. It can be, so every year you never know what the categories are going to be. There's always going to be some that are always there. Portraits and wedding pictures and stuff are always going to be there. But there's always going to be new categories thrown in every year, which is part of what makes it exciting. You never know what's going to come up. And it might be something that, oh, I've got some stuff that can work in that category, which will better your chances. If there's not that many people in the category, you have a better shot. Every year there's more people entering. So, the odds of winning are a little bit longer every single year.
What's the process? I mean, I'm guessing there needs to be some kind of prejudging that needs to be going on until we actually get to the competition. How does that process work? Like, what happens to your image before it ever gets onto the stage at
I got to
imaging?
tell you, this is what I find hilarious about IPC, and people people don't like change. I don't care what the change is. There's always gonna be people who don't like change. So I hear people all the time. People come up to me and talk to me about, "Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this." And back before we had the new system, they came up to me and they said, "I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like this." You can't please everybody. But one of the things that people will say is, I don't like that it's just a head-to-head competition, as opposed to before it would come up and the judges would you were just being judged against a merit. You were being judged against a system, a criteria, as opposed to being judged against another image. Okay. But the funny thing is that the images now in IPC are actually judged more than they were in the old system. Because now every image that you have entered into IPC is sent to 15 separate judges. And these are all judges who are certified PPA judges who normally judge MIR, right? So they are trained to judge on the 12 criteria of a print and assign a score to the print. So every image is sent to all 15 of these judges every year. And every image receives 15 individual scores. And then those scores are averaged. And then that is where you pull the top 16 images for each of the categories that goes to the Saturday. At Imaging USA, there's 2 days of IPC. Saturday is when we start with everything in the 16 brackets, and we start with 16 images in each bracket. So the top 16 in every single bracket go then to Imaging USA. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get past the hurdle of 15 different judges giving you a score before you ever get to the head-to-head part. And the idea is that once you get to the head-to-head part, we're talking about the best 16 images as picked by 15 different judges. They're going to be pretty close. The difference in score between the number 1 picked images and the number 16 picked image may be a point or two. So at that point, trying to pick them apart like that is kind of pointless. If they've been picked apart by 15 judges, I mean, they have just been zeroed and zeroed and zeroed down. And so now it's really going to come down to which one of these images moves you, which one of these images has the biggest impact on you.
So that's one of the things I found really interesting. Just being able to see both of those images on the screen, and then being able to compare them and make as a member of the audience, you can make up your own mind as to which one you think is the winner out of this immediate competition. But here's the thing. So you mentioned prints. What are the criteria in sending in your initial shot? Do you have to send in as a print, or can it be what we
No,
call a PDI over here?
as a matter of fact, you can't send in a print.
Ah, right.
Let me preface this by saying that all the rules are on the PPA website. So go to the PPA website to get all the rules, because I could possibly mess something up. I'm not going to give you all the rules, but the last time I remember, because I can't enter because I host. I'm not allowed to enter. So if things change, I wouldn't necessarily know it. But it used to be 4,000 pixels on the side, and you don't have to put a border, or a fake mat or anything on it. You can, but you don't have to. I would love it if you weren't even allowed to. This is a pet peeve of mine, and I don't like that we dress up the image. I'm like, let's just look at the image. You know what I mean? Let's not use a fake border and a fake frame and all this kind of stuff to try and further influence the judges. Just show me the image. I think the art speaks for itself. It's my personal opinion. But you don't have to do that. It was required in the past, but not so much anymore. So you go and you meet the criteria, and it's a digital file. It's a JPEG. And then there's other criteria depending on what category you're in, because there are categories for digital art, for example, where if you're doing compositing, you have to submit the images that you use to make the composite.
Right.
So you have to show, here's the images that I used to make this thing. And every category has different distinct rules, depending on what the category is. There's different rules for photojournalism, for example, reportage, than there is for weddings. For example, wedding images have to be shot on the day of the wedding, unless you're in the category for wedding images that don't have to be shot on the day of the wedding.
Right.
There was a category this year, I think, that was wedding themed images, which means you could take a bride separately on the day after the wedding or something like that and do something special, or shoot them in a studio or something along those lines. And that could be put into that category, but it couldn't be put into the day of wedding category. So every category has its own settings.
I mean, I'm guessing you're relying on the honesty of the people submitting those in that respect, because there's no way of actually checking that. I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, Rich checks them. And if he sees something that he suspects might be breaking the rules, he'll come back to you and ask you to send him the raw, and he wants to see the raw. And he does the best that he can, and does a good job. These things are always so fluid, though. Everyone's got their own idea of what the rules should be for their category, and it's like it's like my wife when she was in the wedding business. She said that for the first 20 weddings that she did, every single wedding resulted in a new paragraph in her contract. Like, your wedding, something would happen. She's like, okay, there's a new paragraph in the contract now to cover that if it happens again. And it's kind of like that with image competition. Every year some little thing comes up that you've never had to deal with before, and you're like, oh, we never even thought of that being a problem. So now maybe we've got to put that into the rules, and it has to be worded in exactly the right way. And it's a very daunting task to be the person who has to dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure that it's right for everybody.
I mean, making it into the final 16 in your category already seems, I mean, you're already a winner once you're in there to a degree.
Yeah, well, you're a
Uh,
bronze medalist. If you make the final 16, if you make the show, which is on Saturday at Imaging USA, if you're one of the images that makes it to the final 16 in a category, then you're already a bronze medalist. And then every elimination round is a medal round. So if you make the final 16, you're a bronze medalist. If you survive to the round of 8, you're silver. If you survive to 4, you're gold. If you survive, wait, did I just say that right? Yeah, bronze, silver, gold, and then platinum, and then diamond.
right. What's the competition level like? I mean, how many
Clear.
on average, how many images are being entered into the annual competition in general, roughly?
I don't know what the number was. I know that this year's number was higher than last year's number. I think it's somewhere north of 3,000 images. I know it's somewhere north of 3,000. It might be 4,000. I think I said on stage it was 4,000. I think that was wrong. I think it was between 3 and 4,000. I'm not exactly sure. But the categories vary too. Again, if you go into a category that's very popular, then the difference between number 16 and number 1, when they go to the show, it can be very, very hard. However, um, in the categories that don't necessarily get a lot of entries, it can be quite obvious to someone who's done a lot of competitions and looked at a lot of images. So you'll see in the first round, because it's weighted, right? It's tiered. That's not the word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for? When the number 1 goes up against number 16.
Oh yeah.
Seeded.
Oh,
Thank
seeded.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's seeded. So the number 1 image, the image in that category that got the highest score overall, it goes up against the image that got the 16th highest score.
Yeah.
And 2 goes against 15, and 3 goes against 14. Um, and this is so that the number 1, number 2 image don't go up against each other in the first round, which wouldn't be right. So, many times in some categories, those images come up and you're just like, wow, we're just getting started, and how am I supposed to pick between these 2 images? And the other times the first 2 images come up, you go, oh yeah, well, it's A. It's obviously the one on the left. So it really depends on the category. The fewer images, I like to say that the first year, I'm pretty sure I could have medaled, because there were categories I would have entered into that weren't overflowing with images, and I think I could have made it to now I'm not so sure if I could medal so easily. I might could make it to bronze and reportage. I don't know if I was still doing weddings. It would take some of my very best wedding images ever to make it even into bronze in wedding, because some of the wedding people are just incredible. The stuff
I,
that they're producing is
I have to
incredible.
say the wedding category was incredible. It was nuts. I mean, that
Yeah.
was just, and the winner, dare I say, shot everything on JPEG. There you go. That was another eye opener
Yeah.
right there.
Yes. Scott, our
Scott.
friend Scott won,
Yeah.
and in his category, right? In the wedding category.
Yeah. They did.
And he shoots on JPEG with a Fuji GFX.
Yeah.
And
Unbelievable.
I'm just blown away by that. We are seeing more and more. There was one category, Rich told me, and I can't remember what it was. One of the categories might have been nature, or might have been sports, or I can't remember what it was. But he told me that the image that won that category was in the bottom half of the 16. Might have even been last. I'm not sure, but every single round, because the round of 16, the round of 8, the round of 4, the round of 2. That gets you into the Gias. Then there's, again, 16, 8, 4, 2 to win. So there's 8 head-to-head competitions. Once you make it to Imaging USA through 15 judges, you are then judged in 8 head-to-head competitions. It's ridiculous. By 2 different sets of judges. I forget the number, but it's something like 25 different judges look at your image in order to win the whole thing.
Wow.
And there was one image that won 3-2 every single step of the way and won the category.
Wow.
Every single step. Never blew out the competition at all. That's how tough it was in that category. It was 3 judges to 2 at 16, 3-2 at 8, 3-2 at 4, 3-2 at 2. Now it's diamond and wins the category. Then 3-2 at the Chias. I mean, it was just all the way up the line. So it can be incredibly hard to make it. But you can be the outliers, the underdogs can do it. The very first year, the image that won was an image that I really think it was an image that just became more popular every time it came up on screen. It survived the early rounds, and then every time you saw it again, you liked it more.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. What is, if you're thinking strategically and you think like, okay, well, some categories are going to have a lot of entries and other categories not so much. What would be, strategically speaking, what would be a good category to enter into where there's maybe not such a high competition level?
I like reportage.
Mm-hmm.
Reportage usually doesn't get a ton of people in it, and I personally love reportage, and that's why I can tell you that if I was entering, that reportage is where I would put most of my focus, even though I just do it for fun. I would go reportage photojournalism. I don't do it, but if I could do it, boudoir. I would go boudoir because boudoir will typically have some of those images where in the first round is like clearly, this one is clearly going to beat this one. I say clearly to me, but not necessarily to everybody else. You see a lot of, in the very first round, here's what I would do. I would go back. The best way to do it would be to go on Saturday to Imaging USA, watch Saturday, and then watch the categories where in the very first round, there was a lot of 5-0s, where all 5 judges picked this image over this image. That's the category you want to be in. The category where it's 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, that category is already full of rock stars, people who are just producing incredible images. But if it's 5-0, great. You probably could have taken the place of the O guy.
Right.
You might could have got one in there right there. You could have got one in right there. So that's what I would look for. So like reportage, boudoir, nature is always full. Nature and landscape, very, very hard. Weddings, very, very hard.
Portrait must be hard.
This year, one of the specialty categories was portrait of a group.
Oh, okay.
And they decided because it's a thing that everybody does. And yet those images don't usually score very high. So people don't think about putting them in a competition. So they said, let's do a special category, and it's portrait of a group. And we didn't get near the people, I think, entering that category as we thought we would get. And there's hardly a photographer in the country, no matter what they do, that doesn't also do family portraits. So
Sure.
that would have been a good category. I don't even know if the category will come back this year. I don't know what categories that we're putting in
Mm.
this year. So Portrait of a Group was good last year. The Photoshop categories, you better be on your game. If you wanna go into anything that's Photoshop oriented, you better be on your game. You're gonna be going up against the Sandra Pierces and the Richard Sturtevants, and so forth of the world, and they're just the Dan McClanahans, you're just yeah, you better be good. So don't even think about going after those unless you're prepared to be a person who dedicates their life to being very good at it. Because the people you're going up against are people who are taught the best in the world. Um, yeah, that's about it. Every other category is pretty evenly balanced. Sometimes things like Portrait of a Man, because it's not women are photographed more than men are.
Mm.
So if you can come up with some good stuff, Portrait of a Man, you've got a good shot. I mean, you got a good shot if you're a good photographer, no matter what category you go into. But if you want to play the game, go for the categories that have the lowest number of entries.
I think that's sort of probably. I think that's part of it. Really, it's sort of playing the game a little bit. I think for most people, I know this from my experience with like lowly camera club competitions. A lot of people like the gameplay of it. Um, and
Yeah, it's
so
all of it. It's not part of it. It's all.
yeah, and
It's
that's I
every
mean
bit of
that's exactly that's
yeah.
just the interesting thing.
Even in MIR, I was a person I struggled mightily with image competition when I first got into it. My first year, back then you could only put 4 images in a year. And my first year, I put in 4 images and I merited all 4. And I called up, I said, hey, called a friend. I said, I merited all 4, but I didn't loan, which was another step. You get a merit and then you could get judged again and get a second merit. But I got 4 merits, which was at the time was a bronze medal. And I was like, how is that good? And my friend was like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. You don't just merit 4 your first year. Sometimes you're lucky to merit 1. That's great. I'm like, okay, well, I got this. No problem. The next year, it was a goose egg, completely 0. Didn't merit a single image because I thought it was easy and it wasn't. What had happened was the first year I put the 4 best images I had ever shot in 10 years of shooting weddings.
Yeah.
And in the second year, it's like a band that puts out their second album. The first
Yes.
album is the best music they've been playing their whole career, and then the second album is the songs they put together in the last 12 months.
Yeah, and
And
and the
so
ones
suddenly,
and the ones they skipped for the first album, the leftovers was the other thing.
yeah, right, yeah, and that's the way it was. And then the year after that, maybe I merited 2, and then the year so it's definitely a game. And the hardest part for me was that I'm a very analytical person. I'm a very analytical spreadsheet kind of guy. So I wanted it to be there's 12 criteria. Here's what they are. Each criteria should have a certain amount of weight. The judges should be able, very, very, very structured. And people would say to me, that's just not the way it's going to work. And I was like, but it should work that way. That's the way it should work. You should start with a score of 100 and they should take points away based on you not hitting these points. And they were like, that's not the way it's going to work. And it can't work that way because there's just subjectivity in any art judging. There's going to be subjectivity and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to figure out on average what works with the judges and then lean into it. You have to play the game. For example, there's 12 criteria that they look at, but the one that is weighted by far the most is impact. I don't
Right.
care if your image is technically perfect. If it doesn't have an impact on the judges when they see it, you're dead. Taking a technically perfect image is not that hard to do. But if it's a boring image, you're not going to go anywhere.
Y
Whereas if it's
yeah.
unbelievable impact and it's really moving or incredible, they'll overlook they'll overlook a few technical details because they're so moved by it. They can't bear to let it go. They're like, I'm just too moved by this to let it go. There's a reason that puppies score so well. You know, I got a loan with an image of my dog brought home my puppy first day. I'm like in the studio. We have a puppy in the studio. I've got to get a shot of this puppy because I know I'll be able to merit with it, and I did. There's a reason that puppies merit so well. So you've got to play the game. You've got to figure out what it is they want, and then play into it. you can't treat competition, especially, well, competition you can't, MIR a little bit, but competition, you cannot treat it as a marker for whether or not you're a good photographer. It's not. It's whether or not you're good at playing this game.
Yeah. So at my local camera club, um, they are very competition heavy. There's loads of competitions going on, virtually almost every week. They at some point a few years ago decided not to announce the name of the judge in advance, because of course a lot of these judges were known, you know, known quantities, if you want to call it that. And so people go like, "Oh yeah, blah blah, Lucy Schneider or something. She's like a big landscape, so I'm going to enter landscapes because I know that's,
Yep.
and so on and so forth." And so,
Yep.
in order to avoid that, they've decided not to release the names of the judges in advance, so that you literally you enter whatever you think is a great image. It might
I
be,
love that.
might be a
I
bird
love
on a
that.
stick or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
I
love that. I'm a purist. I'm a purist. I'm
yeah,
like, don't tell them who the judges are gonna be. Don't let them put mats on the images. Don't let them name the images, which, by the way, we don't do in IPC, and I'm just so happy that we don't have image names anymore
yeah.
in IPC because we are photographers, and a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so why do I need to give it more? Why do I need to give it a name? The picture should speak for itself. Uh, that's what great photography should speak for itself. If I have to explain to you what that picture is, I'm not, then I should lose points for that, not gain
Absolutely.
points.
And I have a really good example for that, and where I went wrong very early on when I first joined the camera club many years ago. I entered into a competition. It's probably maybe one of my first and only times that I've ever entered into a competition. And I tell you what it was. It was a shot of Alcatraz Island, um, currently topically in the news for some reason. Um,
Yes, they're trying to reopen Alcatraz.
maybe it's now. Maybe you can call
They
it
shut
now.
it down because it was too expensive, and this was, like, in 1962
Yeah.
or whatever, and because it was too expensive, but let's reopen the thing that we already know is unbelievably expensive and doesn't really hold that many people. I've been to Alcatraz, it's like a
Yeah.
tiny little
It,
I why that's ridiculous.
it's a ruin, But I mean,
It
it might.
makes money as a tourist attraction, let's turn it into something that loses money.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, it probably this particular photo that I'm talking about, this will probably now be a historical shot very soon, because
Right.
but so what it was basically, I was on a boat behind Alcatraz and I had the skyline of San Francisco in the background, and of course back then I had to name the image and I called it The Rock. Okay, makes perfect sense. Everybody knows that is The Rock, so on and so forth, except for the judge. So the judge was looking at this, but it came up. He's looking at the picture, and he goes, yeah, you guys like, and you could see the what's it called, the transatlantic building, the big pyramid in the background and all the rest of it. And he's looking at the picture and he goes like, "I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Is it
Oh,
like
you're dead.
some?
No,
Is
you're
it?
dead.
Yeah, is it an island and it's got like a ruin on it or something? I don't know what it is." And he scored it relative. Well, it's not. He didn't. It was like somewhere in the midfield. It wasn't territory. Like over here, the system is slightly different. So they give 20 points, but it's a scale. 20 is the best, but they never judge anything below 15.
Oh, don't okay.
I still to this day don't
I've got you
understand why.
beat. I've got you beat, my friend. Over here, the scale is to 100. Nothing is ever scored below 70, and 50% of the images score in a 4-point range
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
between,
It's
like,
similar.
78 and 82, or is that a 5-point range? Uh, like 50%, and only 4% of the images typically will score over 90,
Right.
and this is the stuff that the people who know me were just like, "Oh, please, just back away slowly from Booray if he starts talking about the scoring system."
Same.
Because it
Exactly.
just drove me nuts because there isn't a statistician in the world that would look at the scoring system and think that that's good, that that's working the way it's supposed to work.
I know.
You know, you can't look at an image and assign it a score on a 30-point scale in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
There's not that much deviation to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I like to say, it's like if I said, "Okay, great. So take a bite of this pizza and, rate it from 1 to 5." Okay, you got that rating? Now, within that rating, rate it again within 1 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Among the pizzas that scored a 4, rate them from 1, where does it fall in that range? Like, that's way too narrow of a range,
Yeah.
we don't need that. So one of the things that I was part of before they changed everything was that we were actually changing the way that MIR was being stored. We were changing it completely, And I think they have changed it. I'm not an MRI judge, but I think they have changed it now where they don't longer score on that number system, because it's just crazy. You only need one system for scoring anything in the world, and it's the universal system that everybody understands, and it's 1 to 5 starts.
Yeah, absolutely. That's easy.
1 to
Yeah,
5 is all you.
yeah, 1 to 5, make it 1 to 10, let people be
Yeah.
frivolous, but
Yeah, so 1 well, because sometimes 1 to 5, you can get a 2.5 because of averaging,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's fine. 1 to 5 with averaging, that's fine, but a 20 or a 30-point range, I defy anyone to tell me the difference between a score of 86 and a score of 87.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, and then, the thing is like, you very
So wait a
often
minute, whoa,
have
whoa, 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 I wanna get back to what you said.
right.
It's 20 points on the range and no one scores below 15?
Yeah, correct, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
So it's
ridiculous,
really
and
a 5-point range.
no, it's even less than that because, I think in let me see, in 8 years of sitting through these competitions almost, I would say fortnightly, probably on average, I've never seen anybody score 15. I think 16 was probably the lowest, but for most competitions, virtually all the images can be scored between 17 and 20. So it's really a
Only a
4 point
3-point
max.
range.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And then of course what happens is because of this idiocy in my mind, there's many people who will love the system and are what, damn. Um, it's so you have the judge and then they'll pick 3 or 4, let's say they pick 4 or 5 images that they score 20 or something, or they score very highly, then they hold them back. And then they have to come back to those, and then they give first, second, and third place out of those. It's like, well, why didn't I mean, I don't, it's just set beyond me. But that's probably one of the reasons why.
I
It's
mean,
weird.
that's me. I spent way too much time thinking about it and way too much time arguing with
Yeah,
people about it. And to this day, people still say, "I love the scores. I love the scores." And I'm like, "Really? Yeah, what'd you get on your last image?" "I got an 81." "Yes, let's look at the individual scores. Let's see." "Oh, not a single judge actually gave you an 81." So you're like, "The scores tell me so much." They really don't. The score you get is not even, I mean, you may not have had a single judge actually give you that score. Yeah, and the whole 50% fall into a 4-point range, only 4% make it in the top third? That doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense, and the judges don't wanna hurt your feelings, so they don't wanna give you. I'm a I like to swing for the fences, both ways when I judge. I don't judge, at the PPA level, because I can't judge, of course, IPC, and I won't judge MIR, even though I've been asked repeatedly, by Rich to please submit and take the test or whatever so that you can judge MIR because I need MIR judges. And I won't do it because I want to judge weddings and I quit shooting weddings. And one of the requirements in order to judge weddings is you have to merit with wedding images like every 2 years
ah,
in order
okay.
in order to continue to be a judge. I don't have the images anymore, so I won't be able to judge weddings, and that's the category I want to judge because I have 15 years of wedding experience. And that's the category I feel I'm most qualified to judge, but I wouldn't be able to do it for more than a year. And so I'm like, so there's no point. Like I would, it would, no, well, you can do judge the other categories. I'm like, but I don't want to. I want to. That's the category I want to judge. That's the. So I don't do that. But now I've lost my train of thought.
Well,
There,
so
well,
you mentioned earlier, that there are 12, what do you call it? The 12
criteria.
points, yeah, 12 criteria that, an image is judged by. So what what are these 12 criteria?
Oh, I think my point was that they don't actually use the number system anymore.
Right.
Oh no, that I judge on a high swing. When I judge local competitions, I see local competitions as really you're just trying to get ready for the big competition. So being nice to you is not helping you, you know? So when I judge a local competition, I'll give somebody because local competitions still use the points because they love them. So when I judge a local competition, I have no problem giving you a 70 or a 65. Because I want you to know that this image needs to go in the garbage. That you do not try and I'm not going to be nice and make you think that you can do something to this image and it's going to merit. This image is never going to merit. You need to let it go. And I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but welcome to image competition. You got to grow a thick skin. You gotta not get attached to your images. You just gotta go, I'm just kinda shuffling through. What about this one? No? Dump it. What about this one? No? Dump it. The criteria, there's 12 criteria. I don't have them memorized. Impact is the most important. They won't say that it is, but it is. And then there's things like technical excellence, focus, composition, color, so forth and so on. And when you get not a review, a critique from PPA, because if you enter MIR, you can ask for a critique, and a judge will actually send you a critique where they talk about your image. They tend to speak in that language. And when you watch IPC as well, if there's ever a judge on the panel who is who is an MIR judge, you'll hear them speak specifically in those terms because they've been trained to speak that way. So they'll say the color balance on this, or the color harmony, or they'll speak to those specific terms because they're trying to educate you as to what you should be looking at in your print and how to fix it. But then you also have people in the IPC panel who aren't trained judges from MIR, and those people you never know what they're going to say, because they haven't been taught this is exactly how you should speak and this is exactly how you should judge. There's always at least one on the panel, and Rich does that on purpose because he wants that different perspective in the room.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you'd have to do in order to be successful at a competition, and we've sort of touched on a number of those points already, actually. Let's start with the why. Why do you think is it a good idea for photographers to enter competitions in the first place? What's the advantage?
Well, you know, first of all, you don't get to hang all this stuff around your neck. Right? So there's this, and believe me, there are people who do it for this, right? They're like, oh, like where's my bronze? This is my first year bronze. Yeah, I think that's the one I got. That's the one I got the very first year, was that bronze one. So yeah, there's people who do it for this. They do it for the bling, right? They want to walk around they want to walk around with all this stuff around their neck, showing how great they are. Yes, there's those people. Then there's more people who do it because it's a way to test yourself and a way to push yourself. I mean, there are people who can't even lift their head off the table for all of the awards that they've got around their neck, and they're still entering every year because they want to push themselves. It's a personal achievement. They want to push themselves to do something, and they'll try new things or different things, and so it's a personal achievement. But above all, it just makes you a better photographer. I can't tell you how much I learned by entering image competition. I can't tell you how much I learned by failing, and having judges look at my image and say, I mean, the simplest things that now I would spot right away and that I just didn't spot. It's amazing the stuff you don't have an eye for when you are a photographer. I've done this 10, 15 years and still, more than 15 years, and still I can show my image to somebody else and they'll point something out and I'll be like, oh my God. I had, when I was still trying to get my wedding degree, I got that about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. And I got it in like 3 years. I was one of the early people to get it. I'm proud of that. There you go. See, there's a reason. I'm proud of that. It took me like, 6 years to get my master photographers, but it only took me 3 years to get wedding. And I'm proud of that. And then I sent an image off to a friend who was a judge. She was on it was Jessica. She was on the panel this year. She was on IPC's Big Show Saturday Night panel. And I sent her an image and I said, I'm thinking about entering this. What do you think? And she came back and she said, well, the bride's dress is pink. And I was like, oh my God. You're standing in a ballroom and there's pink uplighting and her dress is tinted pink. How did I not see that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so obvious. How did I not see that? And then I had to go in there, correct the white balance, get a brush, and completely paint her entire dress to get it back to where it was white. And then it's like, how many other things are in this image that I didn't see? So the more that happens to you, the more you don't forget it. You're like, okay, make sure your horizon line is even. make sure that there's no color tint on the dress. Make sure, about this, make sure with posing, make sure if it bends, bend it. Make sure, the head tilt with the couple, the heads should be tilted towards each other just a little bit because that shows love. Uh, you know, just all the little things. And you get that from competition because your ordinary clients, they don't know that stuff and they don't notice it. You do enough competition, you get to the point where you show someone a picture, like a client, and they go, "Oh, that's the best picture." And in your head, you're going, "No, it's not. There's 5 things wrong with that picture. I can tell you what the 5 things are. I'm not gonna tell you what the 5 things are because you don't see them and you don't and I don't want you to see them. But I can just look at it and see 5 things that are wrong with it." And that's what pushes you to be a better photographer. So competition will absolutely make you an incredible photographer.
It also sounds like you really have to be able to leave your ego outside the door.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You have to be prepared that the image that you thought was the worst of your images is judged the best, and the image that you thought was the best is judged the worst. And you just the best thing you can do is have someone else pick your images for you. That's what I used to do. I put
Right.
together like
Yeah.
10, 15 images, and I would send them to like 4 different people who were all really good and say, "Send me back the best 5." And then I would go from those, and I would pick the final like 4. I there's so much. I had an image that I entered 3 times. I entered it 3 years in a row because I wouldn't give up on it. Didn't change it a bit. The same image, same title, same everything. And what happened was there was no photojournalism reportage category at the time. I entered it the first year, nothing. I entered it the second year, no merit. The third year, they had a reportage category. I entered it again, it merited and it loaned. I got 2 merits for it because now there was a category where it was being looked at and judged for what it was instead of being judged against, you know. And again, back then, you weren't being judged against another image, but still, if they're looking at portraits and landscapes and then your reportage image comes up, it throws them a little bit. One of the great things about IPC now is that that doesn't happen. When you're in the not until the geo round. When you're in the category round, you're only going up against other images that are your type of image. Landscapes are going against landscapes. So I think it's a much more effective way to judge.
I think sometimes, for a lot of people might be thinking, "Oh, I'm just not good enough to enter competitions, so I won't enter." Would you say entering photo competitions is something that maybe beginners should consider?
At the IPC level, it depends. I mean, there's beginners and there's beginners. The first time I ever entered, I went 4 for 4. This makes me sound like I'm bragging, saying I'm one of these. No, the first time I entered, I went 4 for 4, and then the next year I went 0. And I see people when I judge local competitions. You'll see people who are entering for the first time, and they'll come out of the gate gangbusters, and then you'll see other people who enter an image, and you're just like, how could you possibly have thought that that was gonna Like, have you never looked at imaging competition before? You literally you see some stuff that's like a snapshot with a phone, and you're just like, can't you see the highlights are blown out, and the composition is bad, and the focus is poor, and the pose, and there's 20 things wrong with this image. I mean, literally, like it wouldn't be a good picture if my kids took it. And so it really depends on you. You have to look at your work, and you have to look at what goes in the imaging competition and be able to see the difference, be able to see where you need to improve. Talk to someone else. I can't tell you how important it is to talk to someone else. I get people who send me pictures every year. Have someone else give you a brutally honest assessment of your work in terms of photographic competition. And always remember that your ability to do well in photographic competition does not validate your performance as a professional photographer. I had a woman that I was, at WPVI several years ago. They had a and they have a thing there where you can sit down with someone for like 30 minutes and they'll go through your portfolio with you. So I went through her portfolio and I asked her how she was doing and how her business was doing, and she was doing great, gangbusters. And she was obviously upset. And then we ran out of time, but because she was having a hard time articulating uh, what her concerns were. and she was my last one of the day. So I said, "Come over here." We're in the trade show. I said, "Come over here. Let me talk to you." So we went over there, and I said, "Okay, what's the problem?" And she said, "Well, I'm I can't. I'm not doing good in competition at all." I said, "Okay." She said, "And so I don't think I'm a good photographer." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. Do you like your work? Yeah. Do your clients like your work? Yeah. Do they pay you money for your work? Yes. Congratulations, you're a
Mm.
good photographer. Competition is its own animal. Competition, I'm a good driver. Doesn't mean I should be driving in a race. You know, you don't have to be a race car driver to be a good driver. And the majority of us only need to be a good driver in this world. We only need to be a good photographer in this world to be professional and to make a living at it, to make our clients happy, to support our families. So it's just two totally different tiers. So if you want to go to that tier, you gotta devote yourself to it. You gotta say, okay, I'm really gonna devote myself into learning what the judges look for and learning how to see that thing myself, and then make those changes as I'm working and make those changes in post-processing. And if you do that, all of that skill will then trickle down into your day-to-day work. And suddenly you'll notice your day-to-day work is much better.
Would you say it's a good idea to tailor your image to the competition, or just submit your best work regardless?
I'm a purist. Uh, I used to say, I don't like when people shoot specifically for competition. One of the problems I had before we had the wedding degree, and I was a huge advocate for the wedding degree at PPA. One of the problems I had was that the bar for what was an 80 and above, that's a merit, was set by portraiture because there was so much of it. And it was an unfair hurdle to give to the wedding photographers. A portrait photographer a portrait photographer takes their daughter into the studio and does 300 frames until they get a picture that can merit. They dress their daughter. They can take all day because it's their daughter. They can try different lights, different background. They can do everything they want all day long until they find an image that's going to merit for them. A wedding photographer can't do that. We don't control the location. We don't control the light, and we're bringing our own light, but still we have to work with what the light that's there. We don't control what the bride and groom are wearing. We don't get to pick those models. We're on a time limit. I'm like, you can't let that be what sets the bar and then compare it to weddings. Uh, that being said, if there are some categories, if you could compete in weddings, for example, it's great. It's day of wedding. So everyone's kind of on the same surface there. But if you want to compete in something like portraiture, if you're producing portraiture every day for your clients, that's good enough to merit, good enough to make it to the final 16, great. But a lot of people aren't, you know?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then shoot specifically for the competition.
So that's
Because
actually
there are plenty of people who do.
because so this is exactly something I was thinking about, especially in conjunction with portraiture, because in everyday life, like the ordinary life of a photographer, e especially in portraiture, if you take modern contemporary portraiture, like headshots, for example, of course, you're producing a product that sells. There's a market for it, and so you can say, in order for you to be successful in that, you need to have a grasp of the market and serve the market, and so you have to have business acumen in a sense and produce a product that is good enough so that, you attract clients and the rest of it. That doesn't really that doesn't necessarily, unless you're the Ivan Weiss of our times, and you create, headshots that are really pieces of art within itself, you're producing like a commercial commodity to a degree, something which I've never really seen to do well in a competition that I've sat in. Which is incidentally, that's actually incidentally one of the comments I get a lot from like people in the camera clubs. They look at my headshots, for example, like, "Oh man, your headshots are amazing. Why don't you enter them into the competition?" It's because, and I was saying, because I wouldn't do well. There's no
No,
point. They're
no,
commercial portraits. That's it.
no, it
Um,
wouldn't do well. What you do is, in the course of doing your headshots, you shoot a person who has a unique look to them, right? You shoot a woman who's covered in freckles and one eye is a different color than the other one, for example.
I know that
And then
one.
you hand them your card and you say, "I would love to photograph you for free sometime for competition. And can we make that happen?" And then you bring her in, you dress her up, you put her in a special background, you blah, 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 blah. You work it over like crazy in Photoshop and you create something that will merit. But it can't just be a headshot. It has to be something special. It has to be something unique. It has to have a theme. It has to have, something along those lines. You see so many pictures in image competition that are incredible. And you're like, there's no way that the subject of that picture came to the photographer and said, "I'm gonna pay you because I want a picture like this." No, they
Exactly.
didn't. The
Yeah.
photographer decided, "I wanna create a picture of a person whose head is inside a bubble," or whatever, and then they make it happen. But in many ways, that's really what elevates the art, because this is a competition for art. It's not a competition. IPC is not a competition, and no competition is really. They're never really a competition that's solely about the technicalities of photography. It's about art. You need to elevate the form. You need to have impact. People need to look at your image and go, "Oh, oh, that's something." And you can do it without a ton of Photoshop and you look at the last two pictures, the last 2 years, the first 2 years we've done this, and you look at the pictures that won. You know? The first year, uh, Gary took his name's Gary, he took I hope that's right, Gary. He took his elderly mother and set her on an old school bus, that might have been in a junkyard somewhere, and using natural light only, coming in from the window, he took a picture of her looking out the window, and it won the whole thing. It won the whole thing. It beat out the heavy Photoshop stuff, the studio stuff. It beat out everything, because every time that image came up, more of the story sunk in, and it just became a timeless image. It was incredible. And then this year, the image that won, he went to, I forget what, there's a festival in Europe somewhere where they throw color everywhere, like
Oh,
these colored
yes.
dyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes there. And in the course of taking pictures, he takes a picture of a little girl looking at the camera covered in these dyes. And then all he did, he did, is he replaced the background. He replaced the background with a picture of the crowd that was blurred out. So it looks like she's in the crowd, but she's not really. And that picture, every time you saw it, you couldn't take your eyes off of her. And in the end, that's what's gonna sway a judge more than anything else. They're looking at all the details, but in the end, where's your eye keep going? You keep going back, that's your winner. That's your winner. The one your eye goes to, that's your winner. And yeah, impact, impact, impact. At this
Again,
I'm doing it.
yes, it comes back to impact every time, right?
Yeah, and so shooting for the competition is a great idea, but that doesn't mean that you can't absolutely get an image that's gonna win the whole thing when you're on vacation. You know, the guy last year he was shooting, but he wasn't getting paid, and he was on vacation when he shot that. And the other one was just a guy taking a picture of his mother because he wanted to tell a story about civil rights, about being in the back of the bus, and just decided and used his mother for it and won the whole thing. Yeah, I think it's great when that happens. I'm waiting. I know that in the next couple of years, we're gonna have one of these heavily photoshopped, you know, amazing images that's wholly created by the artist in Photoshop and also in the camera, because they use the images and they put them all together. I'm sure we're gonna have one of those win too, but it was really great to see that, the 2 images that won the first 2 years were natural light portraits.
Because the interesting thing about this is that because we're talking about art, because otherwise, there would be a category called commercial images or something, with somebody like, I don't know, photo
There is, I believe.
is there?
Yeah, we have a category for commercial,
There you go. Next time I'm gonna enter,
and
a photo.
they don't get their I don't think they get their due.
Right.
When I judge, I frequently will give a higher score to a commercial image than any other judge on the panel. It's really hard to take a perfect picture of a razor.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Or a watch,
Strangely
it's
satisfying,
really
though.
hard to do that well.
Yeah.
So,
And you can take glass or any, highly reflective surface. It's very difficult, technically speaking, it's very difficult to light that, accurately. It's,
yeah.
and make it look good.
I have a
So
friend of mine right now who's gone down a path where she's determined that she wants to get really good at taking pictures of food. And so she's entering competition with food pictures, and she's doing that incredible stuff where it's like a cheeseburger that's completely deconstructed.
oh, yes. Yeah.
Like so it has to be shot and, she's just going down that path because it will be fun, and she likes it,
Yeah.
she's interested in it. So let's
We
go down that road.
absolutely, and that's the thing. It's like sometimes putting these things together, and creating these composites, for example, is just super fun, and in food photography, the thing that attracts me to that, um, there might be I'm just saying this, there might be a series on food photography coming up on platypod.com. I'm just saying that, but, you heard it here first. The thing that's
Oh,
really interesting.
how many times do you go to a restaurant and they give you a menu and you're like, "Oh my god, who took your picture?" It's like, you're not selling this food at all,
Yeah.
you know?
Weird. I tell you what, weirdly, this is very often the case over here in the UK. It's very often the case with Chinese restaurants, and very often I look at the menu and I'm not eating that. Like,
Yeah.
forget it. Oh
There was
god.
I don't think you guys have it there, but there's a chain here called Denny's, and Denny's is just a diner,
Oh,
you know?
so let me tell you a very quick, in brackets, very quick story about Denny. So on our last day in Dallas, our mutual friend Scott Johnson and I decided that it was time to leave the hotel for breakfast because our flight was late in the day. And so we went to no other than the very well renowned luxury restaurant by the name of Denny's to have some breakfast. It
Denny's.
was it was awesome.
Denny's, IHOP, Denny's, those are your I love a diner.
Yeah.
The king what you really need to do is you need to go to Waffle House.
Oh yes.
Waffle House is like Denny's is a five-star restaurant compared to a Waffle House. Like a Waffle House is just, I mean, a diner's diner. They don't have a deep fryer at Waffle House. There'll be no French fries. They have a waffle irons and a grill, and that's it. There's no oven. There's no deep fryer. If it can't be made on a grill, we don't sell it at Waffle House. And they are open 24 hours a day, and they have the cheapest prices. Because here's the thing, eggs and bacon eggs and bacon are eggs and bacon. I don't care if you get it at the cheapest place or you get the most expensive place. You can't eggs and bacon is gonna taste the same no matter where, right? So why go to the fancy restaurant to get eggs and bacon? And now if you're gonna get a steak, fancy restaurant's gonna have a better steak. But eggs and bacon, breakfast food is good no matter where you get it. So Waffle House is like, yeah. So when you went to think about Denny's, by the way, I was gonna say that made Denny's great. They don't do it anymore, I don't think. But it used to be Denny's menu had a picture of every single dish that they sell.
Oh, I don't remember if there were pictures of
Every
that.
single thing that they
Mm,
sell, there was a picture of it on the menu, and it was great, and they were good pictures, so you didn't have to read the menu, you just looked and went, "Ooh, that looks good, what's that?" And then you ordered it.
yeah.
So when you went to Denny's, what were your thoughts on Denny's?
So I had waffles, incidentally, and I loved them. It was all right. I mean, so there's being European and having grown up in the south of Germany, where waffles are a staple. It's hard to beat that. Um,
Yeah, I would think.
with one exception, actually, with one exception, there's a place in Tahoe City called Heidi's, which is one of the best waffle restaurants I have ever been to. It's very, very
There's a
good.
place in New York, in Harlem, called Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles,
Wow,
that's famous, and I think they started the whole trend of chicken waffle places.
chicken
So
waffle, awesome.
because that's like a thing now, there's other restaurants that are chicken and waffle places. But I love a diner because the food is cheap. There's nothing I love more than just, let's go to the diner and get a cup of coffee and a sandwich or whatever, and just sit and drink coffee and talk.
Yeah.
I'm the happy guy on the plane. You people are like, let's go to the party. I'm like, let's just go to the diner and get some coffee and sit and talk. That to me is much more interesting than any party I've ever been to.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as there's coffee and waffles, I'm in.
Yeah, that's why
100%.
I love England because of the pubs everywhere. I'm a pub guy. I would absolutely be in the pub all the time. I love the idea that
So I like pubs. One of the things I like is like this time of year, especially here in the south of England. When spring is coming, is warming up. Things are opening up, and a lot of pubs here have like outside seating areas. So when it's sunny and warm, you can sit outside rather than inside the pub. And I love that because there are quite a few really quirky pubs, especially where I live. Our local pub uh, has it's at the edge of what we call a common, like a big park, you know, like a foresty park type of thing, and so you sit literally, like, on the park lawn, so it's like a cross between a picnic and a pub
Yeah.
lunch type of thing. It's cool, it's relaxed,
I
yeah.
I'm famously slow at eating, especially compared to my wife. And I'm always like, "Yeah," because while I'm here in this little diner, this is a break from reality in the world, okay? I was working before I got into the diner, and I'm gonna be working when I get out of the diner, but right now while I'm in this diner, it's like sleep. This is my break from the world. I'm not in a hurry to get out of here. Let's sit, let's have another cup of coffee, and I've always been that way. It's like, "No, I'm not in a hurry at all." I like the break from the world, so I love a pub, I love a diner, I love a place where you can sit and you don't feel like you've gotta clear the table and get out of here because people are waiting. No, I like we go all the time, like, at Waffle House, there's Waffle House by our house, and Waffle House does a bang-up breakfast business, but they don't do much business the rest of the day, and they're open 24 hours a day, and it's great because you can go there to get a sandwich at lunch or whatever, and there's nobody in there but you,
Yeah. Well,
and you sit in there.
there you have it. Next time you're in the UK, we'll definitely have to, schedule a pub visit, 100%.
Well,
Definitely.
the next time that you're in, at Denny's, you've gotta get a, Moon Over My Hammy or a
Okay.
Superbird. Those are the 2 Moon Over My Hammy is great, ham and eggs, and it's basically a breakfast sandwich, or a Superbird. I think those are both Denny's. One of them might be IHOP. Moon Over My Hammy? Yeah. I think but those are the 2 that everyone always when they say, "Did you went to Denny's? Did you get Moon Over My Hammy? Or did you get a Superbird?"
Alright, well, I'll take a note of that. I will send you, photographic evidence of that as and when
Please
it
do.
happens.
Please do.
Right, let's
I'll
let's
take you
come
there.
back.
If you go to Imaging USA, we're gonna be in Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We're gonna be in Nashville next year for Imaging USA.
I'm planning on being there, yeah, that's definitely it's
Are
in
you?
my
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, it's in my
This
diary.
time, hopefully, when I see you, I'll know who you are.
That was the funniest thing. We had a full-on
I'll
conversation,
never
but
forget it. I embarrass myself multiple times every single year when I run into people who I've had long conversations with, and I don't know who they are. It happens to me all the time, and I just tell people, "You're just gonna have to accept it. It's not personal. I just meet too many people, and I talk on too many podcasts, and I can't remember everybody. But once you tell me who you are, then I go, 'Oh, God, yes,' and then I remember everything about you."
yeah, you
You
even
know?
you even text me, like, the day after, I think.
Yes, because I
Which
felt terrible. The next day, I realized, "Oh, wait a minute. That's Camera Shake podcast guy." And I texted you the next day, and I was like, "I'm so sorry that I didn't know." And you were not the only one. There are 2 or 3 people that are gonna get that text every year because I hate that I can't remember people's names and that I can't necessarily remember where I know you're from.
I tell you what,
But I get
next time I will wear a T-shirt with, the Camera Shake logo on it.
Camera Shake
That's
podcast on it. Thank you.
that's the way to do it. Right, so competitions. We talked about some of the things to look out for. Now, I'm wondering that if I was to enter a competition, I'm not saying that might not happen. Um, I realized that if you enter one image, you get a chance, but if you enter multiple images, you might have multiple chances. What's your
Yeah.
stand on how many images you should enter? Because if you enter too many, might it distract you from just entering your best work? What's your
Are
stance
you
on that?
ta are you talking about entering IPC?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, wait, yes, I guess so. Yeah,
The
that's what we're talking
IPC
about.
is different.
Right.
Because the thing about IPC is you can enter as many images into a category as you want, but only one will be allowed to go into the top 16. So
Okay.
you can only have one image that medals in a category.
Okay.
So if you want to enter 5 images into wedding, only one of them is gonna merit.
Right.
Now, the other 4 can be entered later into other categories. An image that makes it into the medal rounds to the final 16 in its category, that image can never be entered again. But if it doesn't make it into that thing because it just didn't score high enough, or because you had 2 images that scored high enough, they take the highest scoring one, the other one gets kicked out, you can put that one in next year. So that can be a way, to find out what's good. I mean, I know one person that put 15 images in one category,
Wow.
but like 5 of them would have gone into the top 16. Well, now they know these 5 have are top 16 contender level images. And next year, maybe they just put one of those in. They could put one image in for the next 5 years now and have a pretty good shot at making the medal round.
So do you get feedback on how your images perform even if they don't make it through to the final 16, or how
Nope.
does that work? No.
Nope. You just find out what your score is.
Right.
You find out what your 15 judges gave you a score. That's plenty of feedback.
Yeah.
IPC it's the big dog competition. It's not a local or a state competition where you're trying to improve by, working your way through that. This is the top of the tier. So by the time you get to IPC, you should know a good image when you see it,
Would
and you
would you
should be
say
able to put it in.
would you say it's a good idea to cut your teeth on, like, local competition, maybe on the club level
Yes.
first?
God, yes. 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 The more you do it, the more. The more you do it, the better. The more you compete, the better. And listen, try to learn to be a judge. You want to be good in image competition? Learn how to judge. They say the best way to learn something is to teach it. Learn how to judge. If you learn how to judge, you will then learn how to see an image the way a judge sees it. But I know people who are judges and they still send their images off to other people and say, "What's wrong with this?" Because you can't see it in your own work.
What would you say is, sort of the most common mistakes that people make when they enter their, photographs into a competition?
So many. There's different mistakes. A lot of this depends on your judge, right? Um, I don't know what the most common mistakes are, but I only know, like, what are the mistakes that if you make them and I'm one of your judges, it's gonna kill you, right? And every judge has different things. Um, if you are in weddings and you blow out the dress, you're dead. You're done. You cannot clip your whites in a wedding picture. Can't have the dress blow out, you know? That's not gonna work. Um, if and these are some of these are my own personal things. If you are taking a picture where the horizon is in view and the horizon is not straight, you're done. 101, make sure the horizon is straight. 101, make sure that the dress is not blown out.
Do you worry about talking about the horizon for a second, is it in your view, is it important, so where the horizon is, whether it's exactly on the third or
Yes, absolutely. It needs to be in the it needs to be it needs to be on the line, the bottom or the top. If you're gonna be, like, centered, then it needs to be aesthetically pleasing because you can put the horizon in the center and cut the picture in half if there's some sort of symmetry to it or something, if it works with the story. There's an exception to every rule, right? But because I did so much beach photography, I I'll get that I'll get those people that they'll put a picture of a couple in by the water, and it's like behind them, it's just sand and water, and then way up here at the top of the picture, there's a little sliver of horizon. So they're completely underneath the sky, and it's like, no, you should have gotten low and put them up so that the sky was so they were accented and silhouetted up against that sky. And sometimes when you do that, and this is me personally, when you do that, you can't get low enough to get the horizon where you want it. You just can't do it. Like in Florida, we have here, you can't do it. So most of my pictures, my beach pictures, the horizon cuts right through the middle.
and that's why you need a platypod, no doubt.
You just, I mean, you can get on the ground with a platypod if you want to, but then you're gonna have these, towering. The people aren't gonna look right. Um, because all of our beaches slope down to the water. So
Oh,
the
I see,
photographer
okay.
is always higher than that. You're already higher than the subject. So even if your camera's on the ground, you're still knee and above. And, you gotta hope that you get a judge who understands that, and then, and maybe fights for your image or whatever. But in IPC, there's not gonna be a fight. There's no challenges. There's nothing. So it just has to look perfect. It has to look great. Don't blow out your highlights. Make sure that everything is sharp and focused. It's supposed to be sharp and focused. Make sure that there is a obvious focus to the image. This is a big mistake that people make where they put a picture in and you will hear the judges say, "My eyes are all over the place." I'm not sure. Anytime you hear a judge say, "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking at," you're dead, right? So don't blow out your highlights. Make sure there's something that obviously you're supposed to be looking at, and you can't not look at it. The way the picture is composed is so that you've got to look. Your eye is drawn instantly to that thing. Make sure that thing is sharply in focus. And then if it's portraiture work, there's all the little things that you can do with portraits that you're supposed to know about posing. Like don't let the nose break the plane of the cheek. If they're, don't, make sure you can see both eyes. That kind of stuff that a portrait photographer will immediately ding you for. So the most common, I would say, watching IPC, I would say the most common thing that you hear is lack of focal point as far as what I'm supposed to be looking at, center of interest, and actual focus on the image. Those are the two probably most common things that you'll hear the judges just go, no, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking at there. You want when that picture comes up, you want their eyes to go right to the thing that's supposed to be looking at, and they can't look away.
Yeah.
Their eyes try to wander away, but it just comes right back because there's just nothing else out there that I want to look at. That's what I want to look at. That's impact. A picture that does that, boom. When they come up on that screen, if the judges just goes snap and his eyes snap, and their eyes snap instantly to the picture on the left and the face of that baby, right off the bat, that baby's got a leg up on the picture on the right.
One of the things that I come across a lot in competitions, especially on the club level, are certain cliches, like birds on sticks, for example. I don't know how many times I've seen bloody birds on sticks. It's unbelievable. I'm at the point where I'm more interested in the stick than the bird, at this point.
I have several categories that are like that for me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so my question would be, is it a good idea to enter images that are part of a cliche like that? Because here are the two competing logics. One could be, well, the reason why there are so many of those images is because they're clearly popular. Otherwise people wouldn't be entering them. Or is it a case of don't do that because these cliches are so overused that any judge worth their soul is gonna, puke and run out the room screaming in pain. So
Well,
what's your
it's
advice
so
on that?
hard. I mean, because you're like, I take pictures of birds. That's what I do. They're gonna be on a stick, you know? Um, so it really becomes a case of it better be the best bird on a stick you've ever seen because judges absolutely will get burned out. Judges will absolutely be like, you know, "Oh my god, I've seen this 100 times." Like, there'll be something that will come along with Photoshop or something like 10, 15 years ago, there was this, turning up, shadows and so forth, and you get this real crunchy look, and, like, for a year, oh man, that thing was tearing up competition, and then the next year, people turned in the same sort of pictures, and suddenly it was scoring 10 points lower. Because we've seen that. It was cool last year, but now, not so much. Um, I have my personal favorite is, I don't know if you guys have air shows in
Yes.
England? You have air
Yeah.
shows?
Yeah.
Okay, air shows. I'm so sick of seeing a picture of the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels if flying in formation. It's like, okay, that's a good picture of airplanes, but I've seen that picture 100 times, you know? What's incredible is the airplanes, not so much the photography of the airplanes, and that's me personally. Um, so try and stay away. Like, if you wanna take pictures of air shows and put them in a competition, then you might be able to merit with them, but you're never gonna win. You're never gonna be best in show, you know? A bird on a stick, unless that bird is doing something incredible, it's probably not gonna be best in show.
Well, I guess like the locations that can be quite overused as well. Like here, over here in the UK, it's actually been a massive scandal recently about a place. I believe it's by the Scottish border called this. I think it's called the Sycamore Gap or something, where there's. In fact, it was used in. I want to say. I think it was in the movie Braveheart or something. It's a part. They shot something on location. There's basically a gap. It's by the Roman wall, Hadrian's Wall, So there's remnants of the Roman wall, and then there's two hills, and there's a gap in the middle, and right in the center of that is a sycamore tree. And so it's an outstanding location. It's very identifiable. It's very recognizable, and of course, it's been photographed to death.
Yeah.
In any at any time of year, in any weather, in any color, black and white or whatever. Over the last 100 years, I guess. And recently, here's the scandal: two idiots in their early 20s got high, got a chainsaw out, went out there in the middle of the night and cut that damn tree down.
Yeah, I think I heard about that.
Unbelievable. Um, so, I mean, from what you were saying, I'm guessing that, getting that photo that everybody else gets at that location is probably also it's gonna be difficult to win a competition with that because I'm guessing that judges would have seen that location.
We have a place, here in America called Horseshoe Bend, and it's a river that makes a complete bend, right? Like a big circle. And you can look at go to Google Earth and look up Horseshoe Bend in America because it used to be there's a highway and you pulled off the road there off the highway and then you hiked across the mesa because it's like in Arizona or someplace like that. The flatlands there until you got to the edge where there's Horseshoe Bend, and photographers would go out there and they'd set up a big tripod and they would get these beautiful Horseshoe Bend pictures. Now there's a road and a parking lot and bathrooms and everything else from all the people who just go to take a picture of Horseshoe Bend with their phone. So you can go take a picture of Horseshoe Bend and put it in competition, but we've seen that picture a million times. There's a place, oh, I forget what it's called, but there's a place where there's a canyon. There's like a cave, and the light comes in from the top,
Mhm.
and you have to pay like $150 to be part of a group that is taken to that. And then you go in there and you see it, and you have so many seconds to take the picture. And everyone sets up, and then he takes dust off the floor and he throws it up into the light. And you get this picture of the beams coming in and the dust and the light. And we've seen that picture 100 million times, and you're not going to do really well in competition with it, probably. But the question I have, you kind of alluded to this too, is just as a photographer, what's interesting to you about that you want to go take a picture of something that's been done 100 million times? If I'm on vacation and I go see that tree, I'm going to take a picture of that tree. But to make a special trip just to take a picture of that tree when everyone else is already doing it, that doesn't have any interest for me. I mean, I just don't have a big desire to try and take a really cool picture of the Eiffel Tower. It's been done a million times. I have a story similar to that where I was at Universal Studios uh, theme park here, and they have a whole section that's a Harry Potter section. I don't know. Do you guys have Harry Potter over there?
Well, incidentally, where I'm at, I'm literally just maybe mile and a half away from Leavesden, Warner Brothers Studios, where they shot Harry Potter.
There you
Right
go.
over there. Yeah,
So they have a whole thing that's the alley from Harry Potter,
yeah,
including Gringotts, the bank,
yeah.
and on the top of Gringotts is the dragon. So
Right.
this giant building, and it's curved and tilted, and there's a big dragon, and fire comes out of him, and he's all blah 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 blah. So I'm there, and I'm got my little Fuji with me, and I'm like, I'm gonna take a picture of that building. So I just take a snapshot of the building, and then when I get home, I'm like, okay, well, let's extend this edge of the building to meet the frame, and do this and do this, and let's crunch it up really good, and make the sky come blah blah blah. And that's really cool. I entered in the competition, and I got 2 merits for it, but I'm not proud of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm convinced I got the merits because I think some of the judges who saw the picture didn't realize that that dragon is actually on the building. I think they think that it was all Photoshop,
Right.
and I'm just a master Photoshopper, and no, it's a statue. I took the picture. So I was just like, yeah, okay. Then I'm going to IPC back when it was not done at the convention, and I'm waiting for my ride at the Atlanta airport, and there's a crosswalk right there that leads then a long road going into the airport and covering on both sides of that road. It's a perfect funnel. And there's a crosswalk, and people are crossing that crosswalk. And I'm like, I think there might be a picture here. And I go off and stand in the middle of the road and get low and start shooting pictures of people crossing the crosswalk, but they're completely silhouetted. And I get a picture of a woman dead center in stride with a backpack and her headphones on, perfectly where she needs to be, perfectly posed the way she needs to be. And I loved it. And that's the one that I entered in the competition 3 times until it merited. And I still consider it to be one of the best pictures I've ever taken. And it's in a place where no one in a million years would think there's a picture here.
Yeah.
So for me, finding a picture where there is none is a big part of the satisfaction of being a photographer.
And that's really the difficult one, and also at the same time, such a perfect kind of training ground, to challenge yourself with, trying to find a picture. I remember, years ago, I had a commercial client, they built massive distribution centers, huge distribution centers, that you could put 2 jumbo jets inside, and so they were a construction company that would build these things, and then so the day before handover to the client, when these things were completely finished but entirely empty, I would get called in to photograph them, right? For case studies and for all sorts of different stuff. And it's quite an interesting experience because we're talking about huge blue shoe boxes, basically, they're distribution centers. They're not architecturally interesting in any way, shape, or form, or ornate or anything like that. They're extremely flippin' boring, right? However, photographing them in an interesting and artistic way is a real challenge. It's a real
Yeah,
challenge,
yeah, and
and
very satisfying when you pull it off.
I loved it. It was awesome. So it was super fun. Well, first of all, when do you ever get to spend time on your own in a place like that? That's one thing.
Right.
Um, but but it was just the creative challenge was very satisfying, very interesting. And it's this thing you're hunting for the shot. It's you're trying to get it done. Um, so what should people do if somebody's sitting there thinking like, oh well, I've been listening to this. I think I'm gonna give this a shot. I want to enter into some competitions, maybe later on this year or next year. What would you recommend they do from now on in?
First of all, enter your local competitions and your state competitions. Um, uh, Over here in America, especially, many of the state competitions you can enter, you don't have to be a member of the state organization or anything. They just want entries. So I know guys who do very well in competition that will enter 5 and 6 state competitions with the same images to test them and to see what the judges say. A lot of times there's online, they're judging, it will be online and you can hear what the judges say about the images. And that's how they get the feedback that they need, and narrow it down and find the best images and then put them in, and grow a thick skin. Be prepared that that image that you think is just fabulous, that other people may not think it's fabulous, and you can't argue someone into liking your image. You can't just be like, "Yeah, but can't you see?" No, you're not gonna argue them into it, and you have to remember they don't have the experience of having shot the image. And you have to be able to distinguish how much of your love for this image is based on how hard it was for you to shoot or where you were that day or how lucky you were that you got the shot. None of that stuff applies. I always tell people, if you want to put an image in a competition, ask yourself, if you went to a hotel, is this the sort of image that would just be on the wall of the hotel? And you know nothing about it. It would just be there because it's so pleasant to look at that people will want to look at it. If it's not, I mean, if it's a portrait, that's different. But if it's anything else, if it's not, then it's not image worthy. It needs to be an image that totally on its own just stands up as being interesting and an example of good photography.
And that's absolutely true. That image that I was talking about earlier about Lake Louise, and nobody will ever see that image ever because it is terrible. So not only did I miss the chance there, I also created something that is terrible. And by my own admission, landscape photography not my strong suit. But Bure, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming back and being the guest on this week's Camera Shake podcast. It's as always an absolute education.
Happy to be here.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. Huge thanks to Booray Perry for breaking down the competition game and giving us a judge's eyes view into what it really takes to win. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out some previous episodes for more tips on standing out with your photography. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/camerashake. It truly helps us keep bringing awesome guests straight to your ears. And if you're tuning in via audio, don't forget there's a video version over on YouTube. Just search for Camera Shake Podcast to see the full experience over there. Thanks again for hanging out today. Remember, new episodes drop every Thursday. Mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. I don't know. Until next time, keep shaking things up. See you next Thursday. That's us done for today. Over and out. Until next week.